I'm a DJ boy, going to Dcentral, minting NFT, from DeFi, being crypto poor but JPEG rich.
Hi everyone, I am Agustin Barbara. I am based out of Miami. I am an attorney. I've been practicing for about 5 years now. Literally my firm is called The Crypto Lawyer, so that's all we do. I'm a registered...
It's not just a clever name.
Yeah, it's not just that. I'm a registered patent attorney. My background is in blockchain tech. So should be, got some interesting stuff to talk about.
I'll say.
Hello.
You know, I've been sitting here for a day and a half, and this chair is way more comfortable than I expected it to be, so that's pretty good. Anyway, Kyle Lawrence, please don't judge my picture, which has me with short hair and a suit on. It's disgusting, but in any event, private practice for 15 years. I cut my teeth on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange as a corporate, connoisseur, mergers, acquisitions, private securities dealings. So that was a natural pivot into the world of blockchain and Web3. And over the past year, my partners and I have represented NFT projects, DAOs, crypto investment funds, metaverse land plays, really anything Web3, you name it, we cover it between myself and my awesome team back in New York.
Hi, guys. Jonathan C. Dunsmoor of Dunsmoor Law. I am a solo practitioner in this space. We deal with all the regulatory headaches that you degens think up and have to come to me later and say, unfuck this. And I try to unfuck it. Sometimes we can't, sometimes we can. I didn't see any children in the crowd, so I can say that. But in all seriousness, we do try to make sure that you guys are doing legal things. Because as I've said on stage before, one black eye on one of you guys gives us all a black eye. And I think we've noticed that within the last month or so.
That's a great point, yeah.
So, we were talking backstage, and it sounds cooler, but it's really not. It's like a bathroom with like some snacks in it. But
It's true.
The reality here is we'll take it from the most. So we get clients all the time that call and say, I have this launch in 2 weeks. It's going to be, the next big thing. And the first thing I ask is, okay, well, do you have an entity? Right? And no, they don't, man. It's my boy. It's my boy Jerry. We're best friends. Don't worry, nothing's going to happen. Well, you say that now until when there's nothing going on and there's no money up for grabs. But then when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in, you start having issues. So at the bare minimum, we're kind of just touch on some of the things, and then we'll open the floor for questions as to essentially what you need when you're getting started, just at the most fundamental level, because you can have a great project, but the success that it has is contingent on the foundation that it's being built on, right? So if you guys want to chime in and kind of...
Yeah, piggybacking off that, right? And it also is a spectrum of like, how degen are you going, right? If you've got something that is scaring one of us, you probably need an entity just, to try to limit some liability. But if you're doing something like a PFP project, you just need an LLC, and you need to, make sure that you're abiding by simple corporate governance. So if, God forbid, there is some beef and the entire thing burns down, they're not coming after you personally. Dealing with .ens addresses from a lawyer's perspective, I hope there's no personal injury lawyers here, but if you're in a DAO and you have a .eth address and I can trace it, I'm not a personal injury lawyer, don't do this, but I can then go after that person as a bag holder if there is any type of liability, because it's called joint and severally liable, meaning that if I can go after one of you and sue you, then that one person then has to go after the rest of the DAO to get their money back. And so there are headaches that can be prevented by simply forming a fucking entity.
It's one of the sort of greatest pitfalls, not just for Web3, but for any business that you're starting or any enterprise that you're starting with your friends and your partners. And it's, yeah, we're going to put some money together. We're going to open up a restaurant. And as Augustin was saying, it's, well, do you have an entity? Well, no. Do you have a partnership agreement? Of course not. And in addition to what John's talking about being liable, you just want to have a mechanism in place to determine, okay, we have this money. How do we deploy this capital? How are decisions made? If we want to hire somebody, how do we do that? And if you don't have the basic fundamental of just a company and a simple agreement governing that, you're not really going to have an idea of what happens when those situations arise. And you better have the agreement now, because if you blow up and become successful, well, when you have a lot of money and there's a lot more at stake, you and your partners are going to have different ideas as to what to do. And that, I have a team of litigators, and these are the kinds of issues that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it's such an easy problem to avoid just by picking up the phone and calling us.
Right. And the other thing is, we're in the blockchain space, correct? Yes. But this is a business, right? It's no different than any other endeavor that you're taking on. So first and foremost, set up your entity. And this is a good segue also as to, okay, what about your art that you're designing, right? Who owns it? So you want to have, for example, an art commission agreement where is the artist going to have any royalties? Maybe, maybe not. Are you acquiring all right, title, and interest? It just depends. It could be problematic because if you don't, come tomorrow, they're going to say, well, you owe me royalties. And if you don't have that clearly defined, you're setting yourself up for failure. That also goes for independent contractors, right? The code, who's writing it, right? Everyone's going to want a piece of the pie once the money comes trickling in, and it will. And
or if it doesn't, even if the money doesn't come trickling in and there's a problem, somebody's going to be looking for someone to blame. And I think that's what, sadly, the other part of the coin is besides when there are bags, when there is a failure or when something has, absolutely kind of fallen through because everybody's ready to go and the artist doesn't have, the piece done, well, what does the contract say, right? It's funny, the only time I feel like artists, I don't know how many artists in here, I apologize, really care about contracts is when it relates to their contract in these PFP projects. For the most part, all other artists are like, oh, it's all right, we'll figure it out, man. But like when this stuff happens, like what does the contract say, bro? I need my contract before I get started. And I get that, and I appreciate that from you artists. I wish you would do it more. But when it comes down to it, you have to kind of look at this high-level overview of, hey, what happens if we make a bunch of money, and what happens if we don't make a bunch of money and everything blows up?
I think before we terrify the entire crowd, with like, these are all the things you shouldn't do, or you're all going to burn and forget all that. Who here has ever started a project in the Web3 world? A handful of you. How many of you have formed an entity in furtherance of that? Okay, well, fewer of you. All right, we'll talk after that. We'll get together.
So, up until this point, we haven't even hit the NFT component yet. Right now, we're just going through just proper sort of due diligence when you're setting up your project. Now, this would be a good segue as to, okay, so now we're in the NFT space, okay? IP, intellectual property. It's a big issue. Who owns what? What do I get? Me as a owner of a project, me as an artist, me as a consumer. What rights am I getting? Is all of this delineated out, right? What do you guys think?
So if we have any builders here, this is what I want you to build during winter. I want to be able to log in with a MetaMask or any type of hot wallet and see what type of rights my PFPs have. I've said this before. Nobody's done it yet. Please do it. It'd be really nice to know what has commercial rights, what has private rights, what can I use to open a burger stand, what can I use in a rap video, shit like that. That doesn't exist. If you want to build that, that'd be really dope because it would help a lot of us out. Because then we have to go back and say, oh, to the Wayback Machine, what did the website say? Did they have a terms of service? Like, we didn't even go down that rabbit hole.
Let's pass on.
Yeah, we're going to avoid that so everybody doesn't go to sleep. But those are the things that you have to think about. And not to say that every project needs lawyers and all that stuff. Trust me, I wish we weren't even invited to these kind of things, even though they're fun. But the only reason that we are is because they're complicated. This shit matters, and the reason that you're here and you're paying attention to this and nobody's fallen asleep yet is because it really does affect you, and it affects what you're building. And so I appreciate your time here.
I saw a couple yawns. I attribute it to just being in the afternoon and it's sweltering outside. In terms of intellectual property, I'm not an IP specialist. I'm corporate and securities and finance, but the things I see every day, both from the company's perspective and from the artist's perspective, is you raise a great point when you say who owns what. If I'm an artist and I'm contributing something or I'm creating something for a project, if I'm representing the project, I want to make sure that the project owns the rights to exploit that intellectual property. You want to have what's called a work for hire agreement. I'm hiring you, and you're going to design this for me, and it's mine. Well, if you're the artist, maybe you don't want that, and if you have clout, that's going to be something that you're going to want to think about as you're contributing or developing these things for these projects.
So speaking of clout, there's a little famous artist named Halsey who's literally in a fight with her record label because they're not letting her release a song without doing some promotion for it. So think about that. If Halsey can get fucked over by her record label, imagine what can happen when you guys become successful or there is problems going down the line and you didn't think about them or you didn't address them in your operating agreement or your agreements with your artists. So just kind of at least roll the ball around a little bit.
Another great example, and again, just touch on it, Quentin Tarantino and Pulp Fiction. If you have time, Google that. Very interesting component because this comes down to exactly what we're talking about. And again, no one could have expected when Pulp Fiction came out back in the 90s that NFTs were going to be here. However, it could be as simple as a carve-out clause in your agreement that you're able to exploit derivative works. And that's something that's really important. So, for example, even the trademarks. So, the brand that you have, right, where you're pitching and developing your project is IP that has value. And if you don't take that serious, I'm going to exploit it, right? I'm going to take advantage of it. I'm going to ride your coattails, right? All the goodwill that you're developing. The point of trademarks is not for the actual owner, it's for the public. So they know, right, what the source is. And so if you want other people selling a knockoff of your project, right, then go for it, right? I mean, don't register. However, for you to actually protect your brand from being diluted, tarnished, right, exploited, you want to make sure that your IP rights, right, whether it's copyright or trademarks, that you want to have them down packed so you can enforce them. Otherwise, you're going to see we'll get to that as to derivative works when you grant the commercialization of your actual NFTs.
Yeah. I don't know much about, like I said, I'm not the IP guy. I'll defer to you guys on that.
We deal with enough IP to be dangerous, but IP is the differentiation between IP and securities law is the only thing that allows for royalty rights, right? And so there's a very specific little exemption that we talked about backstage that you do need legal counsel for that I'm not going to say up here, but it is quintessential when you're dealing with an NFT that has royalties. If those royalties are derived from just staking or holding an NFT, you probably need to speak to a lawyer. These guys are great. Well, Kyle doesn't handle with the IP stuff,
okay.
But at that point, you don't want to have to, like I said, come to me and say, hey, I got a letter from something called SEC. What does this mean? You don't want that. It's annoying. It's really costly. And all of the money that you've made on PFBs will then go to me.
Yeah. Another good straw poll is who here would be sufficiently terrified by their project being subject to securities regulation? Has that ever crossed anyone's mind? Couple people, yeah, a couple people. It's more like, oh God, I don't know, I don't want to think about it. Yeah,
I wouldn't mention it right now.
As somebody with vast experience in the securities marketplace and in dealing with the SEC and dealing with regulators both at the federal and state level, it's not something to be so terrified about. Everybody thinks regulation is this boogeyman that's going to come destroy their project and destroy this industry and destroy that. And yeah, there's problems with regulation, and I'm not going to kick the hornet's nest of talking about politics up here, but regulation, which people saw the Senate proposal that came out yesterday, the bipartisan efforts from Senators Gillibrand from my great state of New York, as well as yours, and Senator Thomas from Wyoming, the Republican from Wyoming. That's a good starting point, and what they proposed is that NFTs and cryptocurrencies will be treated like commodities as opposed to securities. So, commodities, coffee, corn, gold, things like that. So, as opposed to, the equity of a business. The plus side of regulation coming in is that it gives us an idea of what it is we're supposed to do, right? Because right now we're applying existing laws, but it's kind of a hodgepodge. We're not entirely sure. We're taking a best practices approach. We know what we're doing, but it's not a one-to-one equivalent of this is how you're supposed to do it. So regulation will at least give some guidance as to what it is we're supposed to do. The downside is that it makes everything more expensive because when you, for example, do a true securities offering, you have to hire lawyers, you have to draft a prospectus, you have to register with the SEC or file a blue sky filing or all that crap that nobody should ever have to worry about. But, so there's pros and cons with it. But don't just assume that regulation is going to destroy your project if that's the kind of thing that you were fearing.
So a lot is being said, but this is fun, right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
There's a lot of really fun things to do in this space, and you as a project owner and developing, you shouldn't be intimidated by this. If anything, you should strive to hold yourself accountable. If you're bringing any legitimacy to your project, you want to make sure that you have these things in place. And once you have them, and it's not that expensive, and it could be intimidating, but if you're setting yourself up for success, you want to have a solid team, whether it's your coders, your developers, your legal team, your marketing team. All of that is very important. So don't be intimidated by it. Embrace it because it's not going to go anywhere. And when things does go south, and it will, right? But you will be in a position where you will be comfortable, right? Knowing that you're doing everything you can to be both compliant, you're protected. And so, yeah, there's always going to be an issue, but are you adequately prepared to handle it? And that's what's important. And so don't be, again, that's what we do, right? We're here to help. And so you're not, we don't expect you to do it alone. And just like you have a marketing, you have a legal team. And I've seen some really great projects that, again, take these things into account and are very successful, very successful.
I've also seen some really great projects that weren't successful simply because they said, well, these aren't regulated and I don't want to pay for lawyers and there's no laws and I can do whatever I want and come catch me. And, the sort of driving narrative of, my marriage is it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission, but don't do that with the government. They're a little, they can be tough.
And here's a real fun piece of illegal advice, right? If they throw your ass in jail, because you won't hand over private keys like Kim.com or others that have been seized by the government, guess what? You're probably going to figure out your private keys real quickly, right? As soon as you spend a night or two in jail. That being said, we only have like 2 minutes left.
We got an extension. I see. Yeah.
7 minutes. Okay. Do we want to do
Take
Q&A?
Does anybody have any questions?
We get paid by the minute, so let's
he like
open up.
skyrocketed, so you want to
And we're charging all three of us, by the way.
do you have
Illegal. No.
What marketplaces, if you typically look at an NFT, paying royalties are optional for the protocol. So what guidance would you give to that? If OpenSea, they cap royalties at 10%, Rarible does 40%. What if the marketplace doesn't even, or there might be atomic swaps where there's no royalties paid? How do I work? Any advice to guide my artists?
It depends. So the reason that a lot of the, let's call them marketplaces, are almost exempt from this headache is because they're just the facilitator. They're the eBay of the transaction. They don't give a shit if eBay's getting a cut to PayPal or your buddy Tim or whoever else, right? And so it really kind of comes down to, is that royalty staying with that person forever? Is it going to be there a short time? Can they sell it? Can they move it? What do your agreements say? And that's what it boils down to is what does the contract say? Now, the contract may be the written physical contract that we draft up, or it may be the smart contract. And if there's a smart contract that says it, make sure the written legal contract says that too. That's the best piece of advice I can get, right? Because if OpenSea fails or someone types a 0 when they weren't supposed to, you have to go back and reset everything. And it's a pain in the ass. I hope OpenSea's here, but I created a dummy OpenSea to spoof an account to prove a point, and OpenSea still hasn't taken it down, right? And so we got a long fucking way to go, guys.
Is anyone from OpenSea here? I'm just curious. No? All right.
They'll message me later.
There's a lot to unpack in there, but the general simple securities test that I'm sure a lot of you have heard is called the Howey test. And people call me up all the time, and they're like, I called this attorney asking about NFTs and securities, and he's talking about leasing orange groves 100 years ago. That's actually true. The Howey test, to define what is and what is not a security, is an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profit which is largely derived from the efforts of a manager or a director or something like that.
What does that mean?
That means you and I get together, you approach me and you say, hey, I want to buy this piece of property, I don't have the money, can I get the money from you? I give you the money and you basically run the entire show. I'm a silent partner.
I'm gonna cut you off. I'm sorry. This is my favorite time to give this answer. So Kyle, please, if you indulge me just for a moment. I have a laundromat, right? My laundromat doesn't exist. I ask you to, hey, buy some tokens for my laundromat. Guess what? That's a security. I don't have a laundromat yet. There's nowhere to put those tokens, right? However, if I have one machine up and running and I'm selling tokens left and right, it has a functional utility. You can use those tokens. Now, with NFTs, it gets a little murky, but you are buying art at that point, right? Now, there's questions with the SEC that, if it's the same piece of art 10,000 times, are you buying a security? Does it have royalty rights, all this other fun stuff? And that's where, unfortunately, the answer is it depends.
Yeah. And to follow up, it really is so unique. This is literally a non-fungible situation where it applies to your particular NFT project, and don't try to figure it out on your own is the best advice that I could give you, because there's so many nuances that you have to look out for. So it could be just one variable that puts you within U.S. securities law as opposed to not. So definitely something that's looking into.
And just to quickly answer the balance of your question about crowdfunding, a GoFundMe page is not a security. That's I lost my house, I need some money to help because a tornado hit it. That's not a security. But if you are raising money through crowdfunding, you're capped at $5 million. There's a whole series of laws about it. And if you're doing that to raise money to fund your project, that is indeed a security.
So that's where we'll differentiate just a little bit, right? Because there's something called non-equity crowdfunding, right?
I wasn't going to go there, but yeah.
Yeah, where you have a Kickstarter and you're buying a cooler that doesn't exist yet. Sadly, that cooler never arrived, and that was a whole other issue. But with a PFP, or most
What's
NFT
a PFP?
Profile picture.
That's true.
Yeah, so when you're buying an NFT and you're getting that immediately, that's when you're generally pretty good. Now, the question that we have for any of the regulators in here, I don't see anybody in good suits, so not good suits, but you know what I mean. They're just guys. Is what happens when you're playing it as a quote-unquote lottery, right? And you don't know what the artist is giving you, or you haven't seen the artwork. That's the stuff that starts making me a little nervous. And so, that's where you have to really kind of figure out, okay, what rights are associated with it? What are we doing with the NFT? Does it have some type of functional utility upon minting? And to Agustin's point, it depends.
But and again, we'll be available. We'll stick around.
You're
I have a
leaving.
flight. I have to literally
You're
jump
not,
on a
yeah.
flight now.
Our buddy,
However, I think we're yeah.
NFT and chill.
We got 2 minutes.
Maybe. For the most part. Well, so the biggest concern is, what are you doing with the funds after? Are you saying, hey, you're just getting another picture of Michael Jordan, there's 10,000 of them, it's a collectible, right? and we're keeping your money. We're not doing anything with it. Or are they saying, and then we're going to go build this 3D game that you're going to be able to play as Michael Jordan, and you're going to be able to export it to World of Warcraft and run around dunking on people? That's where things get weird, right? And so you have to ask, what is your entire follow-through? And I think most of us will get to this point where we say, if you don't want to draft anything, at least draft a white paper or something that we can at least look at and try to get an idea of what the hell you're trying to accomplish.
On that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure being here.
I'm sure you all have tons of questions. Please feel free to flag us down because we kind of ran all over the place a bit. But please let us know. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for listening.